There's a moment when everything you thought you were falls apart. Not just your plans, not just your relationships, but the very structure of your inner world. You wake up one day and you don't recognize the person in the mirror. The things that used to excite you feel empty. The people who once made you feel seen now feel distant. You try to hold on, but the ground beneath you keeps shifting. That's when you realize you're not just going through a hard time, you're inside something ancient, something sacred, something so deep that no part of your ego can survive it. That's the dark night of the soul. But this video isn't about getting lost in the dark. It's about finding your way through it. Because something incredible happens when you stop resisting the night and start honoring it. You begin to hear the subtle sounds of your soul healing. You begin to feel the whispers of the universe calling you back to yourself. And if you're watching this right now, if you've been through the collapse, the confusion, the silence, it means something powerful is happening beneath the surface. You're not dying, you're transforming. And there are signs, strange, subtle, sacred signs that tell you you're emerging from the dark night of the soul. Let's set the stage quickly. You didn't choose the dark night. It chose you, not to punish you, but to purify you, to strip away the layers of programming, illusion, and survival that were never truly you. Most people avoid this process their entire lives. They stay busy, distracted, numb. But you were called to something deeper. And even if you didn't ask for it, you accepted the invitation the moment you stopped pretending everything was fine. That moment of surrender when you said, "I don't know who I am anymore," was actually the beginning of your emergence.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Emerging from the dark night doesn't happen all at once. It's not a sudden sunrise. It's a flicker, a breath, a single moment of clarity after months of fog. It's like a seed breaking through the soil after being buried for what felt like eternity. You feel it before you see it. A quiet shift, a sense of internal space. A moment of stillness that doesn't feel like emptiness anymore, it feels like presence. And the first sign that you're emerging is that you start to feel curious again. Not about the world, about yourself. Curiosity is sacred. It's the opposite of despair. When you start to feel even the slightest nudge to explore something new, to read, to write, to walk, to breathe deeply, that's your soul telling you, we're not done yet. You begin to wonder who you are now, after everything has fallen away. You're not trying to go back to who you were. You're starting to imagine who you're becoming. That spark of curiosity, however small, is the first light of dawn. It's your spirit stretching after a long spiritual sleep. But let's be clear, this process isn't linear. You don't graduate from pain and step into permanent peace. The emergence is messy. You'll have days where you feel like you're back in the depths, where the sadness returns, where the doubts scream louder than the whisper. That's normal. That's part of the rhythm. Think of it as spiritual rehab. You're learning how to walk again, feel again, trust again. And in that process, the second sign begins to surface. Your emotions become more honest. During the dark night, emotions feel like chaos. Some days are numb, others are volcanic. You cry for no reason. You feel rage with no target. You grieve things you can't even name. But as you begin to emerge, something shifts. The emotions don't disappear, but they become clearer. You stop fearing them. You begin to trust them. You realize they're not obstacles, they're messages. They're guiding you, not punishing you. Have you noticed that you can sit with your sadness now without needing to fix it? That you can feel your anger without destroying everything around you? That you can feel joy and not immediately brace for it to be taken away? That's not random. That's evolution. That's your nervous system recalibrating to a new frequency. You're no longer reacting from trauma, you're responding from presence. Your emotions are becoming allies. You're learning their language, and in doing so, you're becoming emotionally sovereign. This emotional sovereignty creates space for the third sign. Your intuition starts to wake up. Not the kind of intuition that tells you what will happen tomorrow. The kind that tells you who you are today. You begin to feel a deep, unshakable knowing. It's not loud. It doesn't scream. It just is. You walk into a room and feel the energy instantly. You hear someone speak and feel the truth behind their words or the lack of it. You sit in silence and feel guided, even if you don't know where. This intuition is one of the most beautiful gifts of emerging from the dark night. Because in the absence of external direction, you've been forced to listen within. And now, that inner voice is becoming clearer, stronger, more trustworthy. You don't need to check with the world before making a choice. You start to trust your own resonance. You begin to navigate life not by logic alone, but by alignment. And that alignment leads you to the fourth sign. You feel a quiet, sacred sense of purpose returning. A purpose after the dark night doesn't look like grand ambition. It's not about saving the world or proving your worth. It's simpler, softer. It's the desire to live truthfully, to speak honestly, to show up fully. You don't need to be a guru. You just need to be you. And that's enough. You begin to sense that your very existence, your breath, your presence, your healing is meaningful. Not because of what it produces, but because of what it is. This sense of purpose might show up as a desire to serve, to create, to love, to rest. It might show up as a new boundary, a new prayer, a new way of being. It might be seen by others, or it might be invisible. But you feel it, that quiet fire, that deep yes, that subtle but undeniable pull towards something real. That's not a coincidence. That's the whisper becoming a song. That's your soul remembering its rhythm. And in that rhythm, you begin to feel something you haven't felt in a long time: connection. Not just to others, but to yourself, to the earth, to the breath, to the divine. You look at the sky and feel held. You close your eyes and feel supported. You walk through your day and feel less like a ghost and more like a presence. You're not fully out of the dark yet, but you're no longer afraid of it. You've made peace with it. You've learned to walk with it. And now, it walks beside you, not ahead of you. So let me ask you something deep. What if the pain you went through wasn't a detour, but a direct call to your awakening? What if everything that fell apart was actually falling into place? What if the dark night wasn't a breakdown, but a breakthrough, a sacred initiation into your truest self? And what if, right now, You are standing at the threshold of a new life, not a return to who you were, but a revelation of who you've always been. You're not just healing. You're remembering. You're not just surviving. You're becoming. You're not just emerging, you're awakening. And even though the world may not see it yet, you can feel it. That quiet strength. That deeper truth. That sacred whisper that says, keep going. You're almost there. When you're deep in the dark night of the soul, your reality feels like a house that's been burned to the ground. You stand in the ashes of what you thought your life was supposed to be, and for a long time, all you can see is ruin. But something miraculous begins to happen when you stop trying to rebuild the same house and start listening to the space that fire has made. You realize that what's actually unfolding is not destruction, it's divine demolition. The universe was never trying to hurt you. It was trying to free you. And the beauty of the emergence isn't in going back to how things were. It's in realizing you've been given the sacred chance to build something entirely new this time, from truth. The first sign we spoke of was curiosity. That flicker of life returning, the spark of wonder that shows up when you least expect it. Curiosity is the soul's way of reminding you that there's more to discover. But what happens next is even more powerful. You begin to feel safe in your own energy again. This is subtle, but profound. You're no longer trying to escape yourself. You can sit in stillness and not feel the urge to run. That's not just healing, that's presence. That's the soul settling back into the body. This returning to self marks the beginning of a deep inner trust. It's the kind of trust that doesn't need proof. It's not about having all the answers. It's about knowing that even if you don't know what's next, you know who you are. You've been through the fire. You've faced your shadows. You've walked through the nights when your own thoughts felt like enemies. And now, you're not afraid of your mind anymore. You're not afraid of your feelings. You're not afraid of being alone. That's not ego. That's embodiment. Emerging from the dark night also means learning how to live without the crutches you once leaned on. The distractions, the addictions, the patterns that helped you cope but also kept you stuck, they start to fall away. Not because you forced them out, but because they no longer resonate. They no longer match your frequency. That's one of the most unexpected signs of emergence. You begin to outgrow things with grace. It's not dramatic. It's not chaotic. It's just done. You wake up one morning and realize, I don't need that anymore. And that moment is sacred. As you continue this path of quiet rebirth, your relationship with time begins to shift. You stop rushing. You stop feeling behind. You stop comparing your path to others. Because now you understand that your timeline is divine, that your soul has its own rhythm. And the more you honor that rhythm, the more peace you feel. The anxiety that once lived in your chest like a permanent guest begins to dissolve. Not because life is suddenly easy, but because you've learned how to breathe in uncertainty. You've stopped needing to know. You've started trusting the unfolding. And here's something wild. People around you start to notice. They may not have the language for it, but they sense it. They feel calmer in your presence. They find themselves opening up to you. Not because you're trying to fix them, but because you've become a safe space. Your energy has shifted. You've become magnetic, not flashy, not performative, but real. And in a world full of noise, realness is revolutionary. That's not something you can fake. That's the result of walking through the dark and coming out with light in your bones. This new energy you carry, it's not just for you. It's for the collective. When you emerge from the dark night, you become a transmitter. You become a living invitation for others to awaken to their own truth, not through preaching, but through being, and through presence, through the way you show up. You don't have to say much. Your life becomes the message. Your healing becomes the lighthouse. And people feel it. Whether they understand it or not, they feel it. But let's be honest, even in emergence, the fear doesn't disappear. It evolves. Before, fear used to paralyze you. Now it becomes a teacher. You feel it, but you don't bow to it. You acknowledge it, but you don't let it steer the ship. You ask it questions. You sit with it. You say, "What are you here to show me?" And in doing so, you reclaim your power, not by fighting the fear, but by understanding it. That's the real alchemy. That's how warriors are born, not through denial, but through digestion. You begin to live in alignment with something bigger than your ego. You begin to feel guided, not by goals, but by grace. Life becomes less about control and more about co-creation. You stop needing to manipulate outcomes. You start focusing on your frequency. You realize that the energy you bring into a space matters more than anything you say, that your vibration is your contribution, that being in integrity with your soul is the most radical act of rebellion in a world built on performance. And this leads to one of the greatest signs of emerging from the dark night. You start to experience joy again. But it's not the hyper, dopamine-driven thrill of escape. It's not the loud, forced kind of happiness we're taught to chase. It's a subtle, sacred kind of joy. The kind that shows up when you're watching the wind move through trees. The kind that arises when you laugh at something you once cried about. The kind of joy that lives underneath everything, like a quiet hum. It doesn't ask for attention, it just is. It lives in your cells, and it's real. This joy is different because it doesn't depend on anything. It doesn't come from getting what you want. It comes from remembering what you are. It's the joy of being alive, of breathing, of waking up and realizing I made it through. It's the joy of knowing that even if everything falls apart again, you won't, because you've been there, you've seen the worst, and somehow you've become more whole, not less. So where do you go from here? You live. You don't rush to teach. You don't force yourself to be a guide before you're ready. You just live truthfully. You honor your process. You keep listening to your body. You keep trusting your intuition. You stay present with your life, exactly as it is. And in doing so, you become the proof that it's possible, that the dark night doesn't end you, it reveals you. Let me ask you something that only your soul can answer. What if the reason you were broken open was so that your light could spill into places no one else could reach? What if your story, the one you thought disqualified you, is actually the sacred key that unlocks someone else's healing? What if your tears were watering seeds of wisdom you haven't even seen bloom yet? And what if, right now, You are more aligned with your true purpose than ever before, not because of what you're doing, but because of who you've become. You are not the same person who entered the dark. You've shed skins, you've lost illusions. You've released identities that were never truly yours. And what remains is something powerful, something ancient, something eternal. What remains is the real you, is soul you. The version of you that doesn't need to be seen to shine, that doesn't need to be loud to lead, that doesn't need to be perfect to be powerful. You've walked through fire, and now you carry its warmth. You've sat in silence, and now you carry its wisdom. You've faced your fears, and now you carry their medicine. And the most beautiful part, this is only the beginning. You're not done. You're just getting started. Not in the way you imagined, but in the way your soul has always known. You've been walking through a sacred storm. A storm that didn't come to destroy you, but to cleanse you. And now, the clouds are beginning to part, not fully, not dramatically, but enough for you to sense something new in the air. A stillness, a clarity, a softness in your breath that wasn't there before. You're not who you were, and you're not yet who you're becoming. You're in the in-between, the liminal, the rebirth. And that's where the most profound transformations take place, not in the light, but in the twilight between what was and what will be. Emerging from the dark night of the soul is not a single moment. It's a sacred sequence of shifts, each one deeper than the last. You begin to notice that your life isn't built on urgency anymore. You're no longer rushing to fix things or prove yourself. You're moving with intention, with rhythm, with grace. You've stopped trying to get somewhere because you finally understand that the destination is here. That the most important journey you'll ever take is the one back to your own soul. And that brings us to one of the most beautiful signs of emergence. Your definition of success begins to change. You no longer measure your worth by how much you achieve, how much money you make, how many people approve of you. Instead, you start asking questions like, am I at peace with myself? Am I living in alignment with my values? Do I feel love where I used to feel fear? These questions become your new compass, and they lead you to something far more lasting than external praise: inner integrity. Inner integrity is when your actions finally match your soul's truth. You speak what you mean. You say yes only when you truly want to. You say no without guilt. You don't compromise your intuition to keep someone comfortable. You don't abandon yourself to avoid being abandoned. You've spent enough time betraying your truth to know what it costs you. And now, you're no longer willing to pay that price. That shift? That's not small. That's a revolution. You begin to trust your inner authority. Not because it always makes sense to the mind, but because it feels right in the body. This is the wisdom that only the dark night can teach you. The wisdom of discernment. You're no longer impressed by appearances. You've learned to sense energy, to feel alignment, to walk away from anything that doesn't honor your spirit. You no longer chase because you've remembered you are the magnet. You are the medicine. You are the mirror. And from this place of inner alignment, something extraordinary begins to unfold. Synchronicity returns. Not the kind you force, but the kind that flows. You start to notice that the right people appear at the right time. that the book you needed finds you, that the message you were praying for shows up in a song, a dream, a stranger's words. Life begins to feel less random, more orchestrated. Not because you're in control, but because you're in harmony. You're no longer resisting the current, you're moving with it. But here's the secret most people miss. The emergence isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you've always been, underneath the trauma, beneath the roles, beyond the masks. The you that was never broken. The you that's been guiding the whole time from within. The emergence is not a makeover, it's a revelation of essence, of soul, of sacred selfhood. And once you've touched that, you can't go back to living unconsciously. You stop trying to fit into boxes that were never built for you. You stop apologizing for your sensitivity, your depth, your need for solitude. You stop dimming your light to make others comfortable. You've learned that your authenticity is not a liability, it's your greatest asset. You begin to embody your truth, not just believe in it. And that embodiment begins to ripple into every area of your life, your work, your relationships, your creativity, your presence. Your relationships, especially, begin to shift. You no longer tolerate connections that drain you. You no longer settle for surface-level intimacy. You crave depth, realness, resonance. You want to be met soul to soul, and you're willing to wait for that. You're willing to be alone rather than be half-held. That's not bitterness. That's clarity. That's sovereignty. That's the kind of love that can only emerge when you've learned to hold yourself through the dark. And when the right people come, you'll know. Not because they complete you, but because they reflect the wholeness you've reclaimed. They don't rescue you from your solitude, they respect it. They don't fear your shadows, they've danced with their own. That's the kind of love that emerges after the dark night. Not codependent, not performative, but conscious, sacred, alive. You also begin to relate to your past differently. The stories that once haunted you lose their charge. The memories that triggered pain now carry wisdom. You stop trying to rewrite the past and start mining it for gold. You realize that every heartbreak, every loss, every moment of despair was a part of your awakening. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What did this awaken in me?" That shift in perspective sets you free. You no longer carry shame for who you were when you were surviving. You see yourself with compassion. You honor your journey. You forgive yourself not because you did something wrong, but because you finally understand what you didn't know back then. That's liberation. That's self-love. That's the kind of healing that doesn't just change your thoughts, it changes your energy. It changes your reality. And perhaps the most important sign of all, you begin to feel a deeper connection to the divine. Not as a concept, but as a lived experience. You feel supported even when things are uncertain. You feel guided even when there's no map. You sense that you're part of something greater. Call it God, call it source, call it love. The name doesn't matter. The connection does. And that connection becomes your anchor, your compass, your home. You realize that the divine was never outside of you. It was always within you, whispering beneath the noise. And now, with the noise gone, you can hear it. You can feel it. You can live from it. That's what the dark night gave you, not answers, but access, not certainty, but connection, not perfection, but presence. So let me ask you this. What would your life look like if you stopped trying to become someone and started being the soul you already are? What would change if you trusted your emergence, even when it's messy? What would open up if you stopped measuring your growth by how much you've healed and started measuring it by how deeply you're living? You've come through something sacred, something few people will understand unless they've walked it too. And if they have, if they know the silence, the grief, the holy unraveling, they'll recognize you. Not by your words, but by your energy, or by your presence, by the quiet light you now carry. The light that was born, not in the sunshine, but in the fire. The light that knows how to hold the dark. You are not finished. You are unfolding. You are not behind. You are right on time. You are not broken. You are becoming. And everything that's happening now is preparing you for what's next, not as a test, but as a transition into deeper truth, into embodied wisdom, into a life that is not just successful, but soulful. So walk gently, walk boldly, walk as someone who has been to the edge and returned with gold. And remember, the dark night was never the end. It was the beginning of your return to yourself. You are emerging, and the world is ready for the you that's finally ready to be seen.